Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. So during the past few weeks, I actually was thinking about what it would be the best way to talk about the relation between data and product managers. And I came up to the conclusion that it would be best to tell my personal story, how I've been handling data since I became a product manager. In 2002. This is not just my personal taste, but it's also one of the hits in 2002. So this was Shakira. This was a few months before I started the university. I was in a chemistry class, and I asked my teacher when I should use one formula in order to formulate or calculate a chemical reaction. Actually, my teacher said, well, use your female intuition. I must say that I didn't like the answer so much. I didn't even find it appropriate. But I must admit also that I have used my intuition many times during my personal life and also during my professional career. However, I'm still struggling a little bit to understand if I have a special intuition just because I'm a woman. 2011. I'm sure everyone has done this. So during my first years after the university, I started to work as a software developer. And it was not until 2011 when I started to become more and more fascinated about the product side of things. My first years as a product manager were extremely rough. I had to take tough decisions without having enough information. Obviously, as a product manager, I was traveling around the world, meeting all my customers to try to understand their needs and their priorities. But I always asked the same question. Was I listening to the most vocal ones, to the most influential ones, or to the ones that were paying my company the most? I had an idea or a hypothesis that I wanted to remove one special function as part of 1 billion mediation data product. But I didn't have any data to support my hypothesis. So what I did is I called my peers, and we had a discussion. This functionality was very high cost to maintain it, and obviously we wanted to remove it. So after having that discussion, we said, best thing we can do is to do a soft delete. We just remove it. If customers come back and complain, well, they were using it, so we need to reinstantiated that as part of the product. Obviously, you can understand how risky and scary that situation was, but we didn't have any other option. Remember that now it's very common that people talk about user researchers, they talk about data scientists, but that was not that common a few years back. 2016, year after year, we are getting or gathering more and more data, collecting and producing more data than ever before. And that had a huge impact and evolution in the role of the product manager. Now we even deal with more data that we can ever analyze. And even though that might sound like a dream for everyone here, data by itself means absolutely nothing. Nothing if you cannot interpret that. So when I started at Spotify as a product manager, I was in charge of the alerting and monitoring products for the whole data infrastructure in the company. And first thing I did was to try to understand how my products worked. And I started to using that. Coming from the outside, from me, the monitoring tool or the monitoring product that I had to use was extremely slow and not very user-friendly. So I was checking the different support channels. I must say that because I work in the data infrastructure department, all my customers are basically engineers at Spotify. So all my customers are internal. So I scanned the different support channels that we have, and I couldn't see any message actually complaining about my product. So I started to interview some of them. And if I can summarize the result of those interviews, I could say that everyone loved the product so much. So for me, it was really contradictory. For me, I had to change the product. It was extremely slow, but my customers like it. So in this particular case, because I found it really slow, I started to put really basic metric. it was a product with a graphical user interface with a front end. So I put a metric to understand how long it would take to load for the different pages, and try to track that over time to see if that was as fast as before or it was getting slower and slower, meaning that the performance was decreasing. So after some weeks or even like some months, I had the data to actually prove my hypothesis. So I could see actually that the performance of my product was decreasing time, like week over week or month over month. So I could even like react fast to the problem, fixing the performance of the product before my customers actually could complain about it. So I would say that always, I must say as well that before that, Spotify didn't have any products to track latency of the different data pipelines, and that's why people were extremely excited about it. Obviously, between having nothing and having something that for me was slow, for them it was working OK. So I would say it's always really important that you try to have data to validate your hypothesis. And also, don't be biased trying to find data to validate it. It's so easy to say, OK, I want to re-architect my product. I will try to find some data to validate that. Don't do that. Try to be as objective as possible. 2018. So now data is part of my day-to-day life, and I'm sure it's part of the day-to-day life of many people here. I use metrics to track how my customers use my product, how often they use it, who are my customers, but I'm not the only one as a PM doing that. All my engineers have metrics to track SLOs, to track performance, to track latencies, and what is really important is we ensure that if one of our metrics changes, we react. And that would be my recommendation. Don't start putting metrics if you are not looking into that. That's just like a waste of time. Don't have metrics if you are not planning to do something when one of those changes. And how do you find success? Again, your metric changes. What do you do? Before even launching the metric, you need to ensure that you have consensus regarding what success means. If that doesn't happen, you won't be successful. I don't see the same thing. Oops. That was the previous one. Hours, I need more. So some key takeaways. So it's been a long day. This is almost one of the last presentations of the day. So what I want to give you is like 3 main takeaways that you can use. Use your data properly and continuously talk to your customers. So again, my main recommendation would be like define metrics. Your department, your company, your team have a goal. Use the metrics to define that you are successful moving forward and achieving those goals. But those goals are not static, and then the metrics are not static either. Take your time. Revisit your metrics when they are needed. Still, it's important that you take another thing that it's important that you take the time to talk to your customers. Don't think that data will substitute the time and the effort it takes to understand direct feedback from your customers. And even though data is powerful, again, if you don't know how to interpret that, it's completely useless. If you don't know how to do it, it's time to ask for help. Data scientists, user researchers, create a business case and make sure that you get the support for them to join your team during a few weeks or a few months. And not every single decision, or don't enter in the trap, actually, to ensure that every single decision needs to be backed up with data. Now, we know we have the GDPR world. Everything needs to be compliant according to the European regulation. So if you know that in order to launch your product, you need to have a compliance module, just do it. Why do you need to have a metric? Why do you need to have data that supports or backs you up? Just do it. Don't spend extra time doing something that is not needed. Lesson 2, don't ignore your gut feeling, but validate it when it's possible. You have hypotheses, you have data, but you also have your own intuition. It doesn't have to be a female one, but just use yours. So use all the tools that are available for you in order to make the right decision at each time. And don't expect that data will solve us all the problems, all the future problems. Data is not a crystal ball that you can look and say, hey, this is the new disruptive technology that will come in 2 years from now. The only thing that will drive big improvements is not just data, but it's innovation. So this was my story. I'm sure it's shared among a lot of people in the room. And again, data is powerful. It's a powerful tool, but it's just a tool. So use it in the right way. Thank you very much.